the case. Enju, the infinite black abyss. When the great scream resounds throughout the whole universe, place your palms together and bow your head. The koan. Enju's husband and their only child, 13-and-a-half-year-old Seth, were visiting Seth's grandparents in Florida. Her husband returned home early, and when it was time for Seth to fly home a few days later, he boarded his flight. On the way home, his plane crashed in Denver. Seth was killed. Of this time, many years later, Enju, his mother, says, an infinite black abyss opened, and a force shoved my head into it. I plunged into a blackness that is always there. But you don't have to relate to it if you are lucky. Her teacher said, Enju, there is a Jizo Bodhisattva in the garden that needs a new cape. Can you imagine enduring such a loss? What a total blow to the narrative of our life that we hold so dearly, that the child should never die before the parent. But there it was. On that somber note, switching gears a bit, when we start a Dharma talk, both here and at ZCLA, we always remember our Native American heritage and, the American genocide. And I've got to say, I found it really interesting about how our culture works, our culture here in America. I'm reminded of from the Bible about the truth shall set you free. I think it's in John, maybe it's more places. But yet, with this truth, we kind of want to hide this Native American genocide in our country. We also want to hide the treatment of, the whole slave trade that is part of our history. And I know I've read about folks burning books now in libraries, librarians getting arrested. And it's so interesting in that in other countries, it's different. In Germany, when you go to Germany, we were just there in the month of June, and you see elements of the Holocaust everywhere in that culture. And then some of it is the Hitler part of it, Adolf Hitler part of it is downplayed. And we tried to find his bunker, and it's very difficult, the bunker where he committed suicide. They don't advertise it. They don't want to push that part. But the kids are mandated to go to concentration camps and visit some of these sites. And of course, the reason is knowing the truth. Hopefully it's not going to happen again. And our country that seems to be so divided right now, it seems, it's interesting that we have a different take. So back here on our home turf in San Luis Obispo, we remember the Yakitutu Yakahini tribe, or the Northern Chumash people. So I would like to acknowledge and pay deep respect to the Chumash people and elders and ancestors, past, present, and future. I acknowledge and offer deep gratitude to this Chumash land and the water here that supports us as we're gathered together right here now. I'd like to also acknowledge all the families, our families, spiritual and blood family, both living and deceased, that have allowed us to be here today. And it seems kind of amazing. And many of our to sit. The Lakota say, Marakoye Oyasin. We are all related. Regardless of what side of the political arena you're on, we are all related. Not just humans, animals, everything on earth. We're all related. So I want to thank you for sacrificing and taking your time and being here so we can participate in this Zazenkai, which means coming together for Zazen. And that's what we're doing. So in doing so, we get a flavor kind of a multi-day session. This is kind of the same format or schedule that we would have in a session. And hopefully you enjoy it enough to consider taking a plunge, right, on a longer session. I call it the plunge into the 4-course meal session. And we're in what I call the session season right now in our practice period or ongo period. And there's I think it's 7 or 9 day session that's coming up, Ruhatsu session down at, well, it's actually, we have Ruhatsu sessions all over the globe, but at ZCLA, it will be in the beginning of December, and that commemorates Buddha's awakening. Then at year end, I'll be leading one. I'll be real involved with the Ruhatsu session this year as well. But at year end, I'll be leading one about 3 days at the end of December. So if you're a serious Zen student, it's really important. This is a real important vow to make, to try to sit at least one full session a year. Roshi Shishin, who's the abbot of Great Mountain Zen Center in Colorado, he's one of the 12 successors of Maizumi Roshi. And he says that's the session is where the magic happens. I don't know that I've always felt that it's magic, because it can be a little tough, as you probably know. So that said, it's, what brought you today to sit here, to give up a whole day of your time to sit Zazen. And now that you are here, what's been arising for you? What have you been bearing witness to as we've been sitting here these many hours? Maybe it's pain. For some of us, it's really physically difficult. Emotions come up. Sleepiness. Awakening. Maybe you've solved a koan, one of your koans. Maybe you're enthusiastic. Maybe you're caught up in a story, your storyland. But regardless, as always, the strongest element of the Zen practice is simply to show up. So please do that. Keep to the schedule and let whatever arises, arise. I really look upon this time that we're able to get together as a gift. And I just flashed actually just now about the last time we did this. It was my brother, it was the end of July, and my brother by all of you to sit in my own black abyss, trying to take that all in. And then, interestingly, yesterday, November 4th, was the 4th anniversary of Roshi Bernie's passing as well. I remember it so well. I was actually, it was a Sunday. I was down in Santa Barbara and doing a talk, and the talk was totally peppered with Roshi Bernie, things relating to Roshi Bernie. And then I got a message on my phone that I listened to when I was driving back from Santa Barbara up here. And it was Ryujin, Corey, was just saying, my condolences for your loss. And it didn't say who. And I said, gee, maybe he called the wrong number or something. And then finally found out, of course, that it was Bernie had passed away. So the koan that I just shared with you comes from the book of Householder Koans, Waking Up in the Land of Attachments. And it's written by my root teacher, Roshi Yagyoku, and Roshi Eve Marco, who is Roshi Bernie's widow. And it's a really wonderful book. I met with Roshi Yagyoku last Thursday, and it was just kind of, we hadn't talked to each other in a long time, so we just wanted to connect. So we did a Zoom meeting. And she told me at that time, I hadn't realized this, that the book has been translated, besides English, into Dutch, German, Portuguese, and Polish. Wow. Isn't that amazing? So there are many Zen communities all over that are going through it cover to cover in workshops. And of course, this is filled with modern day stories. What they did, Roshi Eve and Roshi Yagyoku, was gather their students and ask the students to give them stories from their life. Enju was one of them. And it's an interesting format, and it really resonates with people because it's modern day stuff. It's our life. The format of the book: home, raising children, work, and then, of course, the time-honored loss, illness, old age, and death. And of course, Enju's story comes from that last section. And then there's a final section called Many Gates of Practice. So it's kind of a bunch of miscellaneous stories. But as I said, it really resonates with folks. But that said, if you think the old classics from our standard collections of koans, which are really about monks in another time and another culture, if you think they don't apply to us, think again. They are our life. But that's a whole talk for another story. Enju's koan reminded me immediately when I read it about another Zen parable that I've shared a few times. So most of you have heard it, but it's the mustard seed, the parable of the mustard seed, the story of Kishikotami. And that may sound familiar, maybe not, but we chanted her name. She's part of our women ancestors. We don't call them lineage, and it's because we don't have a complete train or connection or thread of Dharma being passed from one to the other. It was very much a male-dominated tradition for centuries. And so we do have the male lineage that ties, in theory, the Dharma transmission from teacher to teacher to teacher for like something 83 generations or something. So her story, and I won't elaborate too much because I know some of you have heard of it, but this was another mom whose child died. And she is totally distraught. She actually loses her mind. She's going around, and you're imagining it's her home village, so she knows these people, but she's going up to people saying, make my child live again. Bring my child back to life. Well, the kid's dead. and she's walking around with this little corpse. And house to house, people are just saying, God, my heart goes out to you. I'm so sorry. Finally, she hit somebody and said, well, maybe Buddha can help out. Go see Gautama Buddha, because this was obviously at the time of Buddha. And she does. And Buddha says, I can help you. And he's asked her to go to find a house and ask for mustard seed from a house, and get a mustard seed from a house that has never experienced death. So on her journey, she goes house to house. And of course, everywhere she turns, people are saying, well, yeah, we've experienced death in this household. And this goes on, and she finally has a shift and a realization of the impermanence of life. And she ends up joining the order, the Buddhist order, and became one of our women ancestors. There's another story, and I told John a little bit about it, and I said, well, I'll weave it into my talk. Oh, there you are. I get the cameras confused. You're out there, John. Hi. John is exploring his Native American heritage, which has just been fascinating. He's going to be doing a sweat this weekend, but it's been absolutely wonderful that he's on. But I talked about the authentic tea bowl before birth that really relates to this. And her Enju story made me think of this as well. And this takes place during the Tokugawa era in Japan, which is 1600s to, it said, I've got the date right here, to 1868. So there was a monk named Tetsugyu, which means iron bull. And he was serving tea to a warlord, the warlord of Sendai. And this tea ceremony, those of you that are familiar with it, it's very, very formal, very beautiful, actually. A lot of times the tea houses, when they're set up, they don't have a regular door like we might have here. They're half doors. So when you go in, you have to lower down, even crawl in very humbly. And then part of the service is that you admire the tea bowls. And these are usually pretty expensive, revered objects. So there is Iron Bull, and he's with the warlord, and his Dharma brother, Choon, which means tidal sound. He drops by the tea room. Well, he gets invited in, and Tetsugyu, he got an especially precious antique bowl that Lord Sendai, the warlord, had given him as a gift. And so they put it on the tatami mat in front of them. And in the moment of appreciating the beauty of this bowl, the host's buddy, Choon, reaches out with a ceremonial stick he's carrying, and he smashes the tea bowl to pieces. And he says, now look at the authentic tea bowl that exists before birth. So Tetsugyu, the host, about passes out. There's this beautiful bowl, and he just saw his buddy smash it in front of him. Well, Lord Sendai, he was a pretty cool guy. He remains very present. Must have been an Aikido master, I'm guessing. And he says to Tetsugyu, I gave you that tea bowl, but I would like you to give it back to me. But before you give it back to me, please have it glued together and have a box made for it. And on the cover of the box, I ask that you write the name of the bowl, which I now give you as the authentic tea bowl before birth. I will reverently pass the bowl on to my descendants. So who is the bowl? Isn't it you? Isn't it me? And that shattering, for Enju, it was the death of her son, Seth. What is it for you? What has it been for you? I recently shared this story with a batch of inmates at the CMC Sangha that I visit every Wednesday. And I asked them, the shattering, what was the shattering for you? Maybe it was when you committed your crime. Maybe it was at your sentencing. Perhaps for all of us, it could be when we received some terrible diagnosis, a cancer diagnosis, or some other sickness. I actually shared this with a group of cancer patients down in Santa Maria a number of years ago. Or perhaps it was a diagnosis of someone near and dear to you, a friend, a relative. But it can really be any upheaval in your life. Thinking divorce, bankruptcy, loss of a job, not being able to find a job, something happened to your house burned down. My wife Carla, she's retired now, but recently, just before she retired, she's an insurance agent. Somebody lost up in Santa Margarita, lost their house. And of course, we hear these kinds of things with the natural disasters all the time. And how do you respond when your life's been shattered? Enju said, I plunged into a blackness that is always here, but you don't have to relate to it if you are lucky. Don't you? You don't have to relate to it. So her teacher, who happens to be Roshi Gyoku, and is my teacher, responded, Enju, there is a Jizo Bodhisattva in the garden that needs a new cape. So what does that mean? I'm about to tell you. So bodhisattvas in general, most of us are pretty familiar with that, but it's considered a spiritual pilgrim who dedicates their life to helping free others from suffering caused by fear and ignorance, and helping them to see their own wise and courageous, enlightened nature. So in Buddhism, a bodhisattva vows to bring all others out of the vast ocean of suffering. And you're, of course, familiar with the 4 vows that we chant at many different occasions. We'll do it, in fact, after this talk. Numberless beings, I vow to serve them. We used to say, save them, but some people thought that was too much of a Christian, connection, that you're going to save somebody. But this is, so it was actually Roshi Gyoku and Roshi Burn switched it to serve. And Jizo Bodhisattva, and we have a pantheon of bodhisattvas. It'd be really fun to have a class. We've done that before at ZCLA, where we study all the various, they're kind of archetypes. And Jizo is one of them, and one of the most beloved figures, especially in Japanese Buddhism. So everywhere you go, and Rinkai's been there, of course, as well, but everywhere you go, you see these little guys at intersections, roadsides, they're in graveyards, at temples. You see them everywhere. And my Jizo is very heavy to begin with, but this is one we brought back from Japan. I say we, and it was really Carla. I was upset because this was actually, we bought it at in front of one of the temples where one of Maizumi Roshi's brothers was the abbot. And so I thought, we're going to haul this damn thing all over Japan. And we did for quite a while. And then she finally, as she gathered more things, she sent them back. We shipped them back. So Jizo is the Japanese name for this bodhisattva. And he's also known as Dizan in China. And his Sanskrit name is Kashidagarbha. And this gets translated at many different translations, but earth treasury, earth store, earth matrix, or even earth womb. Often this Jizo is depicted as a simple Buddhist monk, and he's carrying a jewel in one hand to light things up, and a staff with a ring on it on the top. And it's actually 6 rings on the top, and that's so he can warn insects and small creatures of his coming, so he won't accidentally step on somebody. So the rings of the staff correspond to the 6 realms that a Buddhist believes we can be reborn into, through which this little Jizo moves effortlessly to liberate other beings. And it's said that he's especially concerned with the realms where most suffering is found. And I have it on good authority that he particularly likes the hell realms. And it's interesting in Buddhist cosmology. So that's kind of the bottom of the rung of the 6. And it's not just one hell, there's like multiple hells. And so Jizo likes to hang out there. And in one of the sutras or writings, he is heard saying, only after the hells are empty will I become a Buddha. So the bodhisattvas continually come back, life after life after life, to help others. Jizo is particularly the protector of women in childbirth, travelers, children, and especially children who have died, both born and unborn. So this especially includes aborted, stillborn, or miscarried babies. And in Japanese folklore, these babies, they haven't been around long enough to accumulate sufficient good deeds, or like good karma, to help them safely through the spirit world. Jizo is also believed to be one of the protected deities of travelers. And so you'll see roadside statues of the Jizo all over Japan. I didn't understand this or didn't know this before, but Jizo is also the guardian of firefighters, pilgrims, and those that are caught in the transmigration between the 6 realms. And as I mentioned before, oftentimes you'll see clusters, a whole batch of Jizo statues with children in around the children's cemeteries. And often they're adorned in red capes and caps. And these are said to offer protection, warmth, and love for the children that have died. Now, there's a great book if you want to learn more about Jizo. It's Jizo Bodhisattva, Modern Healing and Traditional Buddhist Practice by Roshi Jan Chosenbei. And Roshi Chosenbei is actually out of the Zen Center of Los Angeles as well. And she is the abbot of Great Vow Monastery up in Oregon. And she's a pediatrician and specializing in child abuse detection and prevention. And the opening lines of her book are gut-wrenching because she has experienced some pretty traumatic things. So I was a number of years ago up at Green Gulch in a workshop on the Bodhisattva, Jizo Bodhisattva ceremony, learning to do that. It was a workshop. And it was ironically shortly after my own mom had passed. And it is a beautiful ceremony. It's a very simple ceremony. And what I found over the years is that a lot of times there are people that really have an opening. In other words, these are people that have never really grappled with the death, oftentimes perhaps an abortion or a miscarriage, and they've never really embraced it or come to terms with it. And this ceremony can actually help with that as a healing. And it's, again, pretty simple. There's a lot of material, and you will cut out the little capes. And I have, this is actually the cape I did while I was up there. And of course, then Carla brought home the Jizo that I was able to throw the cape on. And there's a little necklace on there and some feathers. John, I don't think that they're turkey feathers, but they're feathers nonetheless. So this, grief accompanies every loss, whether it's recent, something that's happened recently, or it's remote. As I mentioned, a lot of times and I've seen this a lot with women with miscarriages, that they finally do come to term with this loss. I think we've all got PTSD at some level, it seems. There's always been something that's happened in our lives. So this Jizo Bodhisattva, one of the most revered figures in Japan, is known for fearless compassion and perseverance in responses to the losses that we all encounter. As part of that ceremony, we also make cards, and it was so beautiful up there. And this doesn't have to be just children that have lost. It can be done, have been lost, but can be done for just anybody that you've been lost. And what the training was to have community services like this, where you bring the community in. They don't have to be Buddhists, and you go through this whole process of creating material to dress Jizos, and they'll have like 30 or 40 Jizo Bodhisattva statues that they adorn. And then when we were there, you also do a card, and there's you adorn this card, and then you put a message on to your loved one. And then we walk off to this was at Green Gulch, as I said, to the Jizo garden. And most of the monasteries and temples have a Jizo garden. And there's a beautiful tree there, and we attach those cards to the tree. And then there's a service, and we do some chanting. And my card, I put Tamons. And it was interesting that that means we have an English, at least one side of the family is an English background, and Ta was English for thanks. And we were growing up, it was you, instead of saying thanks, Mom, you said Tamon. And that's actually what we put on her gravestone down at Forest Lawn, Tamon. There's another book that I wanted to mention, and it's called Bearing the Unbearable: Love, Loss, and the Heartbreaking Path of Grief. It's by Dr. Jojo Cacciatore. So she's a Zen priest and teaches contemplative practice as a means to cultivate emotional equanimity. She's also a tenured professor at Arizona State University. So Roshi's reflection on this koan, Enju's koan, she references an ancient koan. In it, a monk asks, "How is it when a person who has died the great death returns to life?" The Zen master replies, "You must not go by night, you must go by daylight." And then Roshi Yoku continues, "The life force is unrelenting even in the midst of great loss. The sun rises and warms the earth. New green shoots poke through black lava beds. She's from the big island of Hawaii, so she had a lot of lava in her life. A tiny pink bud appears on a bare branch. At the same time, rebirth does not obviate death. Today, Enju and her husband have two beautiful adopted daughters. Isn't that wonderful? And Roshi, on our meeting on Thursday, said it was kind of an interesting thing that Enju and her husband make a pilgrimage to Denver every year on the anniversary of Seth's death. And they always get lost. Routinely get lost. Not sure what that's about, but it's that thought that was interesting. Now, what's ironic about this, the old koan that she was talking about, is that happened to be the koan that I used for my own Shuso Hosen a number of years back. It's Joshu Asks About Death. And it's found both in the Blue Cliff record and the book of Equanimity, the Shoyu Roku. And that's the book that all of us have used that have been head trainees, Shusos, that we've used as well. And that is written by Shishin Wicks that I just mentioned earlier. It's the abbot of a monastery in Colorado. Now, in that, they talk about, well, in the reflection, Roshi talks about the different dimensions of death. There's the conventional dimension. It's I'm Shogun. I was born October 9th, 1949. I've lived so far some 73 years. And at some point, probably in the near future, because I'm 73, I will die. There's also, however, a spiritual dimension to our life. And this we refer to as, can refer to as the great death, in which self-centeredness diminishes. Remember that word, it's just diminished because it relates to another story. Self-centeredness diminishes and the awakened mind comes to the fore. But all of this life is can be laced with grief. So emphasis was on diminished, self-centeredness diminished. My very first Dokusan with Roshi Yoku, she looked at me and she said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "I want to kill my ego." And she said, "No, you don't. You never get rid of it." You diminish and you begin to serve others. And the more you serve others, the more that self-centeredness can diminish. So in this broken tea bowl story that I shared, it's putting those pieces back together and repairing it with gold leaf. It actually becomes even more valuable. And then Japan and Rinkai, I can't remember there's the name for that, but when things that are shattered or broken and they put them back together, they use gold leaf on it. We have this beautiful bowl that we use to wash the faces of the ancestors in our founders room down at CCLA. And Kanjo, you've seen that? I'm pretty sure. This beautiful bowl about like that, and it's got the gold leaf on the cracks. And that reminded me of words from Leonard Cohen's song Anthem. Ring the bells that still can ring. Let go of the perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So grieving and working through grief. And this koan ends with a short few lines. When everything falls apart, what then? what has emerged from you from great loss. The infinite black abyss. What is it?